Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. And Steve, back to you.
All righty. All right, let's now go on and let's take a little bit of a look at the compounds at a glance here. Compounds at a glance. This is the third view that we have in the MassHunter software. And basically what winds up happening is compounds at a glance allows us to set up a matrix or an array here of what we're looking at, and essentially allows us to look at large amounts of data very rapidly. Most typically, I think you see this where you're running the same samples day in and day out. You could tell that this one may be out or this one wasn't found or something along those lines. So compounds at a glance is very, very useful for data review. In addition to that, since it would be a tool that would be typically employed by reviewers, we have a sample approved box that after they've looked at a given sample, they can approve that sample, and then that sample would come into play or would be approved, and we could bring up that variable in the batch table and utilize that for further work. Okay, we also have compounds at a glance. Well, how do we get there? First of all, you go to the Start menu item, View, Compounds at a Glance. Then once we're in Compounds at a Glance, we can choose Layouts. We have a number of predefined layouts that are available that the programmers kind of thought would be of interest or of use to individuals, depending upon what type of work they're doing. In addition to that, we can also set up our own customized layouts. That when we come into Customize to Layout, Setup, we get the Setup Graphics wizard. And what this does is it allows us to specify samples that we want to view. By default, this comes up with all the samples, but I can remove all and move down to the next sample. I can set this up. So say I want to look just at calibrators. I can just bring in my calibrators here for the samples to view, and I would just look at those. Also, the order of the samples can be changed. Say I don't want to view this blank as the first one. I may move this down in the list, look at my cals first, then evaluate what the blank was. Once I've set up my samples, then I hit the next button in the wizard, and what winds up, it steps me into the compounds, which is similar to the samples. Setup. I can look at some of my compounds or all my compounds at the same time. Then I have the next button is the Organize button. Essentially what this is going to do for us is it allows us to select the organization of the samples as we want to do it. We can define overlay modes that are available, none, targets, qualifiers, internal standards. I can organize my rows by compounds or samples. How do I want to review my data? Sample by sample, compound by compound. Or if I have defined compound groups in my method, I can look at them by compound groups. And then I also have other display options, wrapping, baselines, fill peaks, normalizing, and so forth, whether I want to see the peak annotations for this. I have lots of options on how I want to set that compounds at a glance up in order to do it. Then if I go on to the next, I can set up how I want to review my outliers. Which outliers are very important. I may be calculating a whole bunch of those, but if I don't want to use, say, relative retention time as an outlier, I can uncheck that box. It's been calculated by the system, but I don't want to see it. I don't want it flagged if that's an outlier. Then in addition to that, I can also show all the panes with outliers, all panes without outliers, and all panes with outliers. So I have lots of options that are available here to us. And here's an example. I've now come in to here. I have a couple of outliers that are highlighted in red. I need to check these out. I may wind up manually integrating those. When I turn on my manual integration tool, what I wind up with is activating these menu items or icons over to the right, first of all. And then if I double click on a single pane, it brings me up a manual integration pop-up window, which allows me then to zoom in or essentially get a better view of that and do my manual integrations of either the quant ions or the qualifiers. In addition to that, in the compounds at a glance view, I also have select, then I can print preview. Essentially what the print preview is going to do is show me a chromatogram type report with all the graphic displays, and then I have several different choices of how I want to format that image, how I want to save that file, an EMF file, bitmap, JPEG, and so forth there. So I have lots of options on how I want to report out this graphics display in the compounds at a glance. And as we've seen before in our batch table, our compound information, our cal table, if I right-click, I have properties menus that allow me to do further customization. For example, I have chromatogram colors that I could change here, how I want to view those. I also have the peak annotations. What do I want to see on that graphics display in the compound information window? And this is all, again, customizable for us. Once I've developed a layout that I like, that's working for me, I can save that layout. Then when I come back onto the system, I can do that. Say another user likes a different layout for the data that he or she is reviewing. And basically what will wind up happening, that you can all have individual layouts, and you also have the ability to set that as the default layout so that when you open up compounds at a glance, you can just opens up automatically into there. Okay, Howard, again, let's have some more questions here for compounds at a glance, and then let's take a closer look here at some compounds at a glance features.
Okay. So here we are once again back in our batch table. So as Steve mentioned, to access the compounds at a glance, we just need to go to View and then select Compounds at a Glance. And this is our default setup here. Make this a little bigger there. Okay, so we've got a 5x5 pane setup, and we have our samples again in rows and the compounds in columns. Now the first thing you'll probably want to do once you get in here is get this again set up to go best with your workflow, your preferences. So we can go into layout and set up layout, or we've got this little icon right here. Okay. And in the first tab, we can see that we can choose which samples we want to see here. And now again, these two windows to me seem at least a little upside down here. So I'll show you how this would work. So if I want to start with a clean slate, I would just say remove all. Okay. Now, say for instance, I want to review my standards first, and I don't want to see any other clutter from anything else. So I will just go through and select only my standards. In fact, only my calibrators. I don't even want to see QCs in this. And then I can just select Add. And again, as with a lot of the dialogues we're seeing in MassHunter, we can just go ahead and hit Apply. Okay. So now we've changed that. We can do the same thing for our compounds. Again, if I'm only interested in my targets, I just want to review my targets. I don't care about my internal standards at the moment. I can sort these by the type, select my internal standards, remove only those, and now I've got only my targets visible. Okay. For organization, again, we've got, as I was showing, we've got by default, we're organized the rows by samples. You've got your choice of the overlays. You can look at, again, default's going to be qualifiers, but we've got several choices here. The pane dimension is a nice option if you've got a very large number of samples or compounds, and you've got one of the big, nice 37-inch 4K displays. You can go ahead and crank this all the way up. On my display, and certainly I'm sure on what you're seeing, that's probably wouldn't be terribly usable, but I do see that probably a 4x5 would be good for me. So let me set that up here. So it's a nice little dialogue here. All right. So there we go. It kind of tightens it up for what I'm looking at. And lastly, as Steve mentioned, we again have our choice of enabling outliers. But now by default, outliers, unlike in the batch table, in compounds at a glance, outliers are by default turned off or not tagged. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn all of these on. Notice that several of these are grayed out. There's several whole sections that are grayed out. And again, they are because we have not set limits for those outliers, hence enabling them. And so since there are no limits, the calculations won't be done. Just to kind of save us overhead, there's no need in calculating all these outliers if we don't have any limits for it, okay? And if we apply that, we can see we get some nice little visual cues there that these are probably some things I need to take a little bit of a closer look at, okay? Another nice thing, I kind of found this during preparing for the last talk. I kind of like for some of this sample by sample mode, and this kind of goes along as well with the idea of this sample approved box. So once again, we get our blue arrows here. Blue is going to cycle us, well, in this case, through our different standards. We've also got the drop down. But then as we come through these, if we're happy with these, then maybe not that one, maybe. But this one, yeah, this one looks pretty good all the way across. We'll go ahead and say he's approved. He looks nice. And same for that. Then when I come out of compounds at a glance here, let me just close this. Now, if I want to see that, again, that's not a default column, but I can add or remove the approved column. Okay. And now I can see that these three right here have been approved. We can either on later review, once we get back into this view, this is also an editable column. It's not just review, so we could go ahead if I decide, well, yeah, this is pretty typical for these. I'm happy with that. I can do those, or I can undo those and send them back to the technician to ask them to review and correct, or, however that would work into your workflow there. So that's a little overview, again, of compounds at a glance.
And Howard, there is a question here. I think you may have addressed this during that last little part, but just to confirm, in compounds at a glance, if you set multiple types of outliers to be triggered, can you tell from, I assume, the compounds at a glance screen, which one was applicable to call it as an outlier, or can you only see that on the batch table?
No, great question. Forgot to point this out. If you hover your mouse, you can see right there. So that one is flagged for the accuracy, all right, and it shows you what it is and what the allowed range is. That one has got 2. Retention time's a little bit out. Well, again, and that's a blank. But there's an example anyway of how you could find why it is being flagged. If you hover your mouse, then you get the nice little things there, just like we can see in the batch table. So.
Okay, thank you. Let's check the phone lines. Alan, anybody that has pressed *1?
No questions at this time.
Okay, the next question in the queue here. In ChemStation, there was an option to save an analysis to a quantitation database. Is there a similar or equivalent feature in MassHunter other than appending a directory where the batch is created?
I don't know if I understand that question.
Let me read it again.
For me? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. In ChemStation, there is an option to save an analysis to a quantitation database. Is there a similar or equivalent feature in MassHunter other than appending a directory where the batch is created?
Typically in the MassHunter, we would append or add the batch to there.
Or you could add samples to the batch table. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm too familiar with the quantitation database from ChemStation. I mean, we can, one option, and again, we can ask for clarification offline if this doesn't answer it. We do have the option of once we set up a method, we can save that method as a separate independent file. Well, we can either save it as a .xml file, which is very nice for portability, or we can save it in the standard method kind of folder setup. And then we can go and that will contain our compounds, integration parameters, the calibration parameters, and things of that nature. And we can then pull that into a new batch. You notice we have this method open, and we can open method from an existing file. So, I'm not sure if that answered the question. If it did, just, give us a message again, and we can certainly look into that offline and find an answer for you.
Perfect. Thank you. I have one more question here. Are we going to be covering quantconsole.exe and the scripts provided in any of these webinars, or is that something that's a more advanced feature?
Not in this webinars here, okay?
Okay.
Basically, we're not covering those. Those are advanced features that are typically specified or specific applications that people are interested in this. That's why handling the custom calculations also presented a little bit of a problem because they're very customized. It can answer general, but then I may be avoiding the question. So we'll take this offline then too,
Absolutely. And, something that I will mention later, there are quite a number of MassHunter classes outside of this one, but we'll get back to that close to the end, a little bit of a highlight on some other options for education. Okay, Steve, back to you.
Okay.